What's up YouTube, and welcome to another draw along with me, where today we're going to go ahead and create this design in Procreate using just a few different paint brushes and keeping things nice and loose, not too sort of defined, and keeping this really beautiful painting look. Now, as always, there's links to everything you're going to need in the description down below. Today's requirements is simply just the canvas size and the palette. If you're interested in weekly Procreate tutorials, hit the subscribe button down below, and if you want even more tutorials from me, there's a link in the description down below to my Patreon, where you can get access to 3 exclusive tutorials every single month, as well as the entire catalogue of all the other ones I've done previously on Patreon. So with all that said, let's get started. So once you've got your canvas, the first thing we're going to want to go ahead and do is set a background. Now for this, we're going to go ahead and go to our colours for today's palette, and this sort of arrangement of colours here is kind of our background area. So we're going to grab this middle colour in the first column, and we're going to drag and drop it onto the empty layer that we have to start with. That'll act as our background. The next step is to then identify where our sun's going to be. Now for this, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go to our actions, we're going to go to canvas, and we're going to go ahead and add in a drawing guide. So we're going to go ahead and turn on the drawing guide and then edit that drawing guide. And once you get there, you can pick a few different options, and we're going to go for the option here of perspective. Now I'll change my lines so you can just see the color potentially. They're a little bit dull at the minute until you tap on the screen. So I'm going to tap roughly over here, and then what you'll get is this sort of guide on the screen. And then what it does is, this is your vanishing point. So that's where everything is pointing towards. And this is roughly whereabouts we want to place it. And then when we're done, we're going to go ahead and hit the done up in the top right. Now again, this is just going to be used as a guide. Basically, this is our horizon line, and that's our vanishing point. So where our sun is just creeping into the background there and just going in behind the horizon line, we're going to use this as a guide. Now by default, some layers may use the drawing assist, so just try to ignore it when it pops up. So what we'll do is we'll create a new layer. We'll go ahead and we're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this color here, so it is the second color on the middle row. We're going to go to our brush library. We're going to go to airbrushing and the soft brush. And we're going to make that brush size nice and large. I've got it about sort of 60, that's probably a little bit too big to be fair. Let's go down to about sort of 50%. And from this point here, we're just going to go ahead and try and draw in a circle and just spread that outwards towards the edges a little bit. So we're getting a nice amount of color here from our little center point there, and all the color is just bleeding out towards the edges. So once you've done that, we'll then go to our colors and move to the sort of warmer tone here. It is the third color in that middle row. Let's reduce the brush size down to maybe 30%, and again from that point there, in a circular motion, just build in a nice bright glow. So this is where our sun really is going to sit in the background, and you can spread that out a tiny bit. And then we're going to go ahead and go to our layers. We're going to create another new layer, and we're going to set this layer to a different blend mode. So we're going to change the normal option here. We're going to scroll down to color dodge, and what we're going to do is we're going to make our brush size a little bit smaller again, maybe around about sort of the 19%, if not slightly smaller. We'll get down to about, let's get down to about 14%. We're going to go ahead and tap on our vanishing point, so just here, and tap a few times, and slowly but surely you'll start to build up a really bright glow. And this is our sun in the distance there. So we're going to just tap a few times, making sure we get like a nice sort of glow like this. Now don't worry about the shape for a second in terms of it being a circle, because then we'll go up to our adjustments. We'll go to Gaussian blur, and we'll swipe from left to right, and that will just, what that will do is that will just blend out the edges a little bit more and give it a nice soft look to the outside. So a little something around about 15% there at the top. So you swipe from left to right on the screen, and then when you're done, just tap on your adjustment. So now we've got our basic sort of landscape in a sense of our sort of vanishing point and the sun. Let's go ahead now and add in the actual layers of the sort of mountain range-ish in front of it before we start to move into textures. So we'll go up to our layers, and we're going to create another new layer. We're going to go to our colors and take a look at this set of colors here. So the darkest should always be closest to you, and then the sort of more faint colors should be further away. So we've got this first color here in the top left of the palette. We're going to go to our brush library, and we're going to go to painting. And inside painting, we're going to use the turpentine brush. Really fun brush, but it very much does replicate that real world sort of feel of paint. So you will have to potentially just sort of blotch on a little bit of color potentially if you start to notice your brush go a little bit faint. Again, if I just show you that, if you start to draw in, you'll see it starts to smudge quite a bit. So if you get a really faint amount of color there, just sort of blotch it in again. You can see there it gets a little bit more sort of full with the amount of color. So what we want to do is we want to create a little bit of a landscape here for our little bit of architecture that's going to go in this space here. And we're going to use this horizon line as well. So I'm going to make my brush size around about sort of 10%. That will give us a good enough sort of shape size wise. And all we're going to do, we're going to keep it really nice and loose, not too sort of detailed in terms of creating solid shapes. We're going to sort of come in from the side here, and that's very sort of faint at the minute, and then just run up onto that horizon line where our arch is going to sit, and then just blotching in some color. Just let this run down off towards the bottom right, and then just start to smudge it all together, create some really fun, again, loose shapes. We don't want to create anything like we would with like the monoline brush, for example. Something really nice and loose, really sort of painting look to it. And then once you've got sort of your top line, increase your brush size up to maybe something around about 18%. And now just start to fill in the land. So I'm going to go across a few times and try to sort of blend in that color and just push it across towards those edges. So pushing it across, filling in the gap. But what I'm trying to also do is towards the bottom edge, just let things get a little bit faint. I don't want the shape to be too full. I really like this sort of streakiness in here. It adds that sort of real look in terms of the painting aspect. So we're going to do exactly that. We're just going to sort of brush it in here, but let it get nice and faint towards the bottom. Don't try and block it in too much. And you should end up with a little bit of a landscape like this. Now, if you want to, you can always go back into maybe about 10% and just block in the edge where necessary, make adjustments where you feel is sort of required, and try to just create that very loose looking edge to it. I'm just going to solidify even that top line there and just let that run out towards the left. So that's my first piece of land ready to go. And the contrast between the sun and that little area there looks great. So next, let's go ahead and work on the next layer back. So we're going to go to our layers and create another new layer and drag it underneath the layer we were just working on. So drag that into position just underneath. Now, just so you know what layers we're referring to, we can tap on the first layer that we just drew in, this little area here, and we can rename this and call it foreground. So we know which one we're referring to. The next layer down, the empty one that we're about to put here, will now be the midground. And this is always really useful just so you can get an idea as to where your layers are. So we've got our midground, we need our midground color. So we're going to go back to our colors and grab the second color on that top row. We're going to go ahead and introduce a little bit of a hillside here. Now, it's not going to be the bit that sits in front of the sun like here, for example. It's going to be a little bit closer to us. So I'm going to sort of start here and maybe just create a little bit of a swooping hill off to the right. Now, I want to do the top line first, just like we did a second ago. And once you've got that in place, like so, just like we did on this layer, we're just going to slowly start to blend that color down a little bit. We don't want it to be too full down here, but we want it to also, have a good amount of color in there. So what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to keep it super faint as it gets kind of close to the other layer that we just made there. That will just give a little bit of separation and also give that more realistic look, because in real life, of course, you wouldn't then start to just run in behind here because you would just destroy that. So we're just going to block that in and just give that really beautiful loose painting look. So just a couple of lines like here where they don't necessarily match up will look great, and we can block in a little bit of color there. The next layer then is to create the back set of mountains, which are going to then nicely just bring our whole design together. So we're going to go up to our layers. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer above our midground for a second and then drag it underneath. And let's rename this and let's call it background. So it's background in terms of our sort of 3 levels of ground here. We're then going to go to our colors and grab the third color on that top row. And just like we did a second ago, we're going to create the top area first and just let that run down. Now we're going to create sort of a peak about the mountain here. And that's going to run down just in front of the sun and sort of come into this sort of area there. So let's do exactly that. Now over here on the left hand side, it may be a little bit sort of hard to see because the colors are kind of close to one another for a moment. But we're going to just create that little peak of that mountain and just let that run down into this area here. And again, once you get close to this area of land down here, you want to keep it nice and soft nice and sort of faint and kind of streaky. So you've got this little bit of a gap here. If anything, that looks like almost like a bit of a lake almost running in between there. And then I'm just going to block in the color here just up to this bit of land. And I may even reduce the brush size down to something about 5% and just get in here and maybe just define the landscape a bit more. Maybe just create a bit more of a peak on here, just to show that that's sort of a background mountain area. Maybe take a look at some of the areas here where they get really loose and maybe just tighten them up just a tiny bit. But otherwise you'll end up with a mountain that runs in there and just runs in behind our midground. And there we go, we've got our streaky landscape all ready to go. You could probably go ahead and just sort of block this off a little bit more. Let it just run in front of the sun just a tiny bit more. So there we go, we've got our landscape. Now at this point, to be honest, we can actually go up to our actions and turn off our drawing guide. It was only there just to give us an idea of where we need to point everything to and our horizon line, just to make sure everything sort of blocks off the sun correctly. So let's go ahead now and add in some textures onto these. So let's go to our layers. We're going to go ahead and work in the background area first. So we're going to use a few different sort of masks for this. So the first one we're going to go ahead and do is create a new layer. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab the yellow. So it's the third color in the middle row. We're going to go back to our brush for a second and we're going to go to airbrushing and we're going to use the soft brush. Now this is a little trick you can do to add textures but to a shape that you've already defined. So what I mean by that is we're going to go ahead and make our brush size maybe around about sort of the 25% mark. And we're going to add a glow just in behind that mountain. So just going left to right, just adding in a bit of a glow up here like this. And then once you've done that, we then go to the layer, we go to tap on it and we use the option here of mask. Now your mask by default is white, meaning everything is showing because the mask is white. So what a mask does is it hides and it shows part of the layer it's assigned to based on the colors of the mask. So if I was to make this mask now black by tapping on it and using the option of invert, so if you use invert on white, it flips it to black. The whole layer now disappears because the mask has masked everything out. You can't see anything through the black. So black hides like a shadow and white reveals like a light. So now the layer is set to black on the layer mask. Our color in the top right needs to be set to white. So you can double tap in the top left hand corner to do that. We're then going to go to our brush library and we're going to go to painting. And we're going to go ahead and use this brush up here, the Tamar brush. Now we can make the brush size maybe around about that 43% mark. If not slightly smaller, let's go to 30. And what we're going to do is by painting in with white now on the mask here, we're going to reveal part of that glow, but we're going to use the brush, so we're going to get a bit of texture. So I'm just going to go left to right in a sort of swooping motion and maybe add a bit more pressure here and there just to reveal it a bit more. And then what we've done is we've revealed that in the distance there, but it's got a little bit of this painting texture inside of it. Now, we did that on purpose because I didn't want to use this brush straight away. It doesn't particularly give the right effect. So you're creating the shape that you want with the soft airbrush, and then you're using another brush to add texture essentially on top of it. Now, with the background, we've got one more layer to create. So we're going to create a new layer. I'm going to go to our colors. I'm going to go ahead and grab this color here, the middle color in the first column. And we're going to make our brush size a little bit bigger, maybe around about that 36% mark. Now what you want to do is you want to keep your pressure nice and light. If you come through here too hard, you'll end up creating something like this. We want to just add in sort of a rough little bit of texture. So we're going to go ahead and just go from left to right at the top until we get into the lighter areas underneath. And then you should slowly start to see little bits of erosion such as this. And that will just give us that final effect in the background anyway of what we want. So a little bit of this, just going along that top edge, super light. They are very minor details, to be honest with you. Now, if you can't see those darker textures too much, what you could do is go to your layers and go to this layer here. This was the glow that we initially created, and you can grab your cursor and the uniform option and maybe make that a little bit bigger. And you see, by doing that, I'm going to start to show some of those sort of darker textures towards the top. And then move that back into position a little bit more. And tap on my cursor when I'm done. So that's just something you can do, but that's just added a little bit of texture there in the background. Let's go ahead, and while we're working on the background, we've got one more layer to make. So these are all of our background layers, the actual background itself. We're going to add in some stars and some birds. So we're going to go ahead and create a new layer. Now we're going to go ahead and keep the color as it is, but we're going to go back to our brush, and in painting, we're going to go back to the turpentine. we're going to keep it really small, maybe around about 2 or 3%, and just create some little little shapes there in the background. Very loose, so again I'm going to go from 2% just to change up the brush size. Some little V shapes there in the background, and we want that very, very loose, very sort of free-flowing painting look. So a couple of really skinny ones, and then maybe let's add in another one way over here, and this one maybe a little bit chunkier and a little bit darker, but just a little bit of variety in there. And on the same layer, we can just simply go to our colors. Let's go ahead and grab this color here. It's the 4th color in that middle row. And we're going to keep our brush size really small, about 1%. And we're just going to, in a circular motion, just dot in some stars. So this is going to use the texture of the brush. And you can see it's not quite a dot. It's just got a little bit of a sort of scribblish look to it. A little bit of a brush look. And we're just going to add in some stars, some nice and light, some quite dark. Just a few stars at the top of the screen of our canvas, and just add in some of these. Just a few, and maybe one quite nice bright one. So again, we're keeping it nice and loose with the sort of textures throughout the whole of this. So let's go to our layers now. Now, if you're done with your background, you can, if you want to, pinch all of these layers into one, and they will go onto one layer. If though you have an iPad that's got a lot of layers, you can undo that, and you can just simply group all of these together, group them, and just collapse the group down and just make sure that it's nice and organized. Now we'll go to our background. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer above that and tap on it and clip it to the background layer, which is this little mountain here on the left. On this empty layer, we're going to go ahead and go to our colors. We're going to grab this yellow again, so the 3rd color on that middle row. Go back to your brushes and go to airbrushing and the soft brush. And again, towards the bottom, we're going to add in a bit of a glow. A little bit of a glow towards the bottom edge, making it nice and bright right down here. And then what we're going to do is go ahead and go to the layer. We're going to use the same mask trick, so we're going to tap on the layer and mask it. The mask is set to white, so we need it set to black so it's not showing. So we tap on the mask and invert it, and making sure you're on the mask and your color is set to white, we're going to go to our brush library. We're going to go to painting. We're going to go back to the Tamar brush. Maybe make the brush size a bit smaller this time, about 20%. And just from left to right, just start to bring in that little bit of a glow again. But it's going to add that little bit of texture on top. And you can see if I zoom in, we've got this beautiful, beautiful bit of texture. You can see that there on the screen. So let's just carry on from there. So let's just go left to right a few times. Again, don't press too firm too quick. You'll end up blocking it in too much. So just a little bit. And just adding in that very loose look. And to me, again, this just adds to exactly that I keep saying, that nice loose look, keeping things really sort of quite artistic and nice and painting-like. Let's then go to our layers. We're going to create another new layer. We're going to tap on this layer and clipping mask it. We're going to go ahead and go to our colors, and we're going to grab this color here, the 1st color in the middle row. I'm going to go straight in with the Tamar brush on this occasion though, and just on the top of the mountain, just very lightly, just left to right, just adding in a few darker patches here, just over the top, just to sort of give a tiny bit of extra color on that ridge line. That's it. It's just a very tiny change, and I can show you the difference between the two. You can just about see that color change there. And that's it. That's our background done. Again, you can group all of those together. You can rename that group, call it background, so it's obvious what it is we're looking at. And you can collapse that group down, or you can tap on the group and flatten it if you've run out of layers. Let's collapse that down. Let's go to our midground and do the same. So we've got our midground over here. We'll create a new layer, tap on the layer and clipping mask it. Go to our colors, grab the yellow, go back to your brush library and airbrushing and the soft brush. And again, let's just add in a glow towards the bottom. Or something like this. Go back to the layer, tap on the layer and mask it. Tap on the mask and invert it to black. And then with your color set to white, and you're making sure you're on the mask, go back to your brush library, go to painting, go to the Tamar brush, and let's just paint that in again from the bottom, adding in a little bit of texture in this area, like so. Again, just to give that overall full impression. Let's then go to our layers, create another new layer, tap on that layer and clip it. Then go to your colors, grab this color again, the first color in that middle row. And again, just a tiny bit of color on that top ridge line, just to sort of give a nice transition of colors. And there we go, we've got our midground done too. So let's go back to our layers. We can group them all together by swiping from left to right on all of those layers and hit group. Tap on the group name and rename it to midground. And then what we can do is we can collapse that group down. We can then go to our foreground here and create another new layer. Tap on it and clipping mask it. Go to your colors, grab the yellow again. Go to your brush, switch it back to airbrushing and the soft brush. And again, let's just give a nice big glow towards the bottom edge here. Once you've done that, you'll start to reveal that line a little bit there. We then want to go ahead and go to our layer, tap on it and mask it. Tap on the mask and invert it. Make sure your color is set to white and you're on the mask. Go to your brush, go to painting and use the Tamar brush again. And then this time we just want to paint in that little bit of a glow down here. And this looks great in this one because it's really close to us. You'll get a lot of this texture of the brush come through. Now don't worry too much if your sort of bit of land here doesn't go all the way to the bottom and you start to reveal this bottom edge. When we add the border later on in the design, the little edge here will be hidden anyway. So there we go. And you can see all that really cool texture in here. And I just, again, brings the whole thing together quite nicely. Now, we're not going to go ahead and add in a sort of darker area on the top here just yet. We're going to go to our layers and add in our main subject, which is going to be this beautiful piece of Chinese sort of architecture. So we're going to create a new layer right at the top. We're going to go back to our actions and canvas and the drawing guide. We're going to turn it on, but we're going to edit the drawing guide now. And we're going to switch it to the option of symmetry. Go to options and make sure you're set to vertical. That will give you this line that runs down the middle of the screen, and I'll set it to white so you can see it, and hit done when you're done. Now what this allows you to do is, with the symmetry option in play, and this layer now says assisted underneath it, whatever I do on one side, just as an example, will be reflected on the other. So we can draw in our structure, making sure both sides look identical. So let's go to this color here. It is the first color in the top left of the palette. We are going to go to our brush. We're going to go to the turpentine brush. And we're going to start drawing in our little structure. Now, again, you're going to want to sort of see what it is you're doing on one side, just so you can see it on the opposite side. So just zoom out to a point that you're happy with. And I'm just going to guide you through this. So I'm going to sort of keep the brush size quite small, maybe around about sort of 2%. That still gives us that painting look to it, but gives us enough sort of smaller brush size so we can create some detail. Now the first thing we want to do is create a line that's going to run across. This will be sort of our guide pretty much for the full width of the piece of architecture. So we're going to go ahead and draw in a line. So we're going to go all the way across, hold your pen down, and then you should roughly get a line like this. Now it will start to somewhat erase itself and smudge itself. So just run back over the line a few times, really block it out. And this is going to be sort of a horizontal beam that goes all the way through our little sort of Chinese arch here. I'm then going to go ahead and draw in another line just above that, so leaving a gap in between, and then just going backwards and forwards a few times. Don't try to make your lines too straight. Keep them nice and sort of wavy, very loose, again, like the whole theme of this design. We're then going to add in the columns here as well. So we're going to go ahead and just roughly in from those sort of horizontal beams there, just roughly here, I'm going to go ahead and draw in a line down. So I'm going to go down to roughly sort of this sort of point here. And then using that as a guide, I'm going to go ahead and draw in a few times. Now what I want to try and do is I want to create sort of a center column here, like so. And then what I also want to do, I'm going to make that a little bit longer. I want to start to make them a little bit wider towards the base. So they get a little bit wider. So we're just going to thicken them up towards the base and let them sort of pivot in and point in at the top. And you can create straight lines for this if you'd rather. Just block it in with a nice straight line. It's totally up to you, but I want that beautiful, nice painting look. We're then going to go ahead and then from here, we're going to create two supporting beams off to the side. So we're just going to draw in a little line here and a little line here too. That's then going to allow us to create another column that's just going to sit just here. And that's also going to go down to the same sort of ground point underneath. So we're just going to paint that in like so. And then at the top, we can always reduce our brush size down to like a small 1% if you want to get really granular with the detail. So we can create like a nice swooping point at the top over here, and then just push that into the column. So just so we've got a little bit of a piece of detail there on the top. And we can really define that if we want to, bringing it in at the sides, making it go up into a nice point, little something like that. And again, it's reflected on the opposite side, so we're doing our work only once. We're then going to go ahead and look at the top of our column. And on this column here on the right hand side, I'm going to create a little bit of a joint. So this is just where the sort of architecture, in a sense, with the arch starts to get a little bit more detailed. So we're just going to create a little bit of a block here, and then a slightly wider block. So we'll make this a little bit wider here. So we're just drawing in some really simple shapes. Just bring that across, link that up at the top, and then just nicely fill that in. Now make sure you fill it in with a good amount of color, otherwise you'll see your lines in there like you just saw with mine. We don't want that. And then what we're going to do is just above our columns, we're now going to get into sort of the swooping piece of sort of architecture at the top here. Now just as wide as you've gone here, we're going to go ahead and just bring in a swooping line that's going to be a little bit sort of wider than the top there, and just swoop that in towards the middle. So a little something like that. So there's a bit of an arc to it, and it also swoops up towards the right hand side there. And then again, just block it in with some nice detail and color, blocking that in. You can block off the end if you want to make it a nice solid shape, little something like this. And then we're going to go ahead and replicate that again, leaving a little gap in between. We're going to basically draw that again, but make it a little bit wider this time at the top, leaving a little gap in there, pushing that out. And then we'll create in a second a join in there. And then we're going to do it one more time. We're going to go right above, and we're going to make this one a little bit wider again, swooping that in towards that middle point, and then just swooping that out towards the right. Again, keeping that color, you can see they're nice and loose. There's little gaps in there. That's fine. Happy to have some gaps. And we're going to make this top one a little bit thicker, just to sort of finish off the top of this piece. A little bit thicker there at the top. That looks great to me. And now what we can do is we can just join them up here by just creating a line that runs in between them, such as here. You could even create like another sort of little bit of detail by just creating another line here that just joins them together. And there we go, we've got our arch there. Just take a look at your design at this point, maybe just tidy up any edges. Maybe I can make this one a little bit more solid there on the edge. Take a look at your colors. Do you need to join like things together a little bit better? Are you happy with how much you've added in color wise? Because now what we're going to do is we're going to adjust this to match our sun. So once you're happy, go ahead and grab your cursor. We're going to move it across to the left hand side because this is where it's going to sit. But that's too flat. We want it to face our little light source there. So we're going to grab the option of distort. We're going to go ahead and grab this node here, drag it down a little bit. And we're going to make some adjustments now to sort of give it that perspective. So we'll grab this node here in the bottom left, maybe move that up, and we'll move this one down. Don't worry, I will pause towards the end so you can see exactly the final sort of shape. But there we go. This is my final sort of shape. So you want to adjust your points. You've got 3 on each side to this sort of angle. So you can bring in this node here a little bit. You can drag this one out. And that's the sort of distortion you want to make. And you can see there, it faces our light source. So when we tap on our cursor, it very much does have that angle where we're facing off into the distance. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add some highlights to it. So we're going to go ahead and go to our layers and create a new layer above it. Tap on that layer and clipping mask it. So it's now clipped to that shape. So we don't have to worry about running out into other objects. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this yellow here, the third color in that middle row. And keeping with the same brush, everything towards the right hand edge of most of these shapes, we're just going to sort of brush in a nice light highlight. So a little bit of light there on the edge because our light source is here, it's coming across. So I can hit the left hand edge here of this column. Now don't worry if your color's too bright, we can maybe adjust it afterwards, but we're just going to add in some light on there, a little bit on the top edge maybe here, just a little bit of light. And again, we're keeping it nice and loose. I know I keep saying that, there'll probably be a counter on the screen no doubt, but we are just keeping it nice and loose with our colour. Now here, we've got a little bit of a tight gap, so I'm going to reduce the brush size to something about 1%, if not as small as I can go, and just try to paint in the underside of this one here. Maybe even the ends as well, just give them a little bit of colour, just a tiny bit. And then you can increase your brush back up to maybe 1 or 2% and just blotch in some colour there. We're going to add in a little bit on this part here, which we created, and then we also create this big block here, so we'll add in some colour on there, push that round a tiny bit. When you zoom out, you're already going to get an idea for how this lighting is going to come to life. Now we've got these beautiful arcs under here. Now what we can do is we can pretty much go across the underside of both of these, and or all three, and add in some colour like so. Just a little something like that. I'm going to make brush size a little bit bigger again. I'm going to add in a little bit of colour there, and then leave a gap where it touches that column. We'll add in some light underneath there, on the end as well. Reduce the brush size down to 1% again, and we'll do this arc here. So just a little bit of colour under these, leaving a gap where we've got the lines that run through that just support it. Little something like that. Oh, that looks nice. And then we'll go ahead and go across this beam here. Across this beam. And again, I'm just letting that brush do the work. Just very lightly, just painting that in. Letting the brush do that sort of really nice loose painting look to it. We'll then block this in again up here and add in a little bit of highlight on there as well. And then we've got this column. So again, we're just going to add in a little bit of colour on there. Run down the inside edge here. And you don't have to make this a solid piece of highlight. For example, I've got a big streak there. I've got a bit of a gap, and then I've got a little bit of colour there. If we were using the monoline, for example, it would look a little bit more like this. But that's not kind of the impression we want to go for today. So we'll undo that. And then we're going to go ahead and just add in some colour on here. Just a little something, little top of there, little top of here. And again, zoom out. That's kind of the final look, so you can go ahead and pause at this point. But zooming out and taking a look, that just gives us that little bit of light just hitting the piece of architecture. It looks awesome. I'm just going to go up to my actions at this point and turn off my drawing guide so I get rid of that line in the middle. And now we're going to go ahead and add in a border and some texture, and we're done. So we're going to go up to our layers. Again, you can join all these together if you wish. So swipe from left to right and group them, and you can rename that group and call it foreground. And then collapse that group down. And then we're going to create a new layer at the top. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this light color here. So it's the fourth color in that middle row. Go to your brush library. We're going to go back to the Tamar brush. We're going to make it a little bit big, so about sort of 28%. And what we want to do is we just want to create a border. Now, there's two kind of ways you can use this. If I go down and use a lot of pressure, we're going to get something like this. If I then do that again, but towards the left of it and go really lightly, you'll get a little something like that, and you can overlap that a few times. So we're going to go ahead and try and create a really fun border. You can also go around in sort of a little bit more of a circle look to it, and that will kind of rough up the edge there, making it less of a perfect streak. And then we can go across the bottom. So the brush size is set to 28%. We're going to go across the bottom, doing the same. And then in the corners, maybe a little bit of a circular motion just to sort of get a bit more of a rough look to it. And now I'm going backwards and forwards with a lighter streak. And then again in the corner, a little bit of a circular motion just to rough it up. We'll go down that left edge, nice and light, then maybe go a bit firmer towards the actual edge of the canvas. Add in the odd little streak if you want, that runs a little bit closer into your design. I'm also going to make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to run across the top edge here. Block in the actual initial border, and then just use the brush to really rough up that edge with a circle sort of motion to it. You get these beautiful little sort of random bits that just break into the design. Be bold with it, let them just sort of crack away into it. It'll be really fun. And if you do it all the way around, it will really fit in. So you can do a little something like this, a little something like that. Try to make your border nice and consistent, but you'll end up with these beautiful pieces here that just break that up. And you can always do like the odd little sort of light twirl with the brush that just eats into the design. Maybe not something quite like that, not something too big, but just the odd little random piece like here and here are just going to nicely take away that border a little bit more. Make sure it's nice and even all the way around until you're happy with how it looks, but you should end up with something a little bit like this in terms of a border. And then we're going to add in some texture, so a little bit of canvas texture on top. So we're going to go up to our layers and create a new layer. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and set it to black. So we're going to double tap at the bottom of the disc to select black. We're going to go ahead and go to our brush library, and there will be a link in the description to the canvas brush. It's actually part of my original Halloween collection, so I've got it in the Halloween, but you will have the individual brush, and it will be right at the bottom in imported. Any brush you include or add into Procreate that's on its own always goes into imported. If it's a collection, it will be up here in your collections. So we're going to use this canvas texture. We're going to make the brush size 100%, and all we're going to do is fill the screen. Now don't press too firm too quick, you'll end up getting something really dark like this. You want to be very light with your pressure and go backwards and forwards, build up the colour always, and go over the canvas a few times, just adding in a little bit of that texture. It's going to run into your design as well. And then once you have given it a nice light coat, we're just going to go up to the layer. We're going to change its layer effect, so it's blend mode. Tap on N for normal. We're going to change it to color burn. And we're going to lower the opacity down to about 50%. Feel free to tinker with this how you wish. You may want to add some more texture, you may want to take away. But in your design now, you'll get this beautiful bit of texture running through everything. That really sort of finishes off the whole design. And if I pinch with 2 fingers, we go full screen with 4. We end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed this nice little painting design. As always, there's links to my socials in the description down below. Please come and share your designs with me over on Instagram, in my Facebook group, TikTok, wherever you are, come and share your designs with me. And if you didn't already know, I post weekly tutorials here on my YouTube channel, but I also post 3 more over on my Patreon. There's a link in the description down below if you want to come and join my Patreon, where you get 3 exclusive tutorials every single month. Sneak peeks of upcoming designs, you can get early access to YouTube videos and Patreon videos and much, much more. So hit the link in the description down below. And if you enjoyed this video, you'll probably like this one on the screen now. There'll be one over here on the right hand side. So be sure to check that out. I've got loads of tutorials, lots of different styles. So be sure to check out the channel and the Draw Along With Me playlist. If you're interested in any piece of equipment, it'll all be linked in the description down below, as well as discount codes as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.